Welcome back to the People Data for Good podcast. I'm Al Adamsen, and I had the joy to speak with Tony Ferreras today about his journey in people analytics, from growing up in Los Angeles to going to undergrad and grad school to investigate how we function as human beings and interact with one another. And in turn, he either contributed or led people analytics teams in media companies, tech companies, retail companies, and now he is leading people analytics at Pinterest. I enjoyed this discussion. I was inspired. I learned a lot, and I sense that you will as well. So thanks for being here today and enjoy. Hi, welcome back. I'm here with my longtime friend and colleague, Tony Ferreras. Tony, how you doing?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me. It's always an honor to talk to you. Definitely an honor to be on here. Thanks for having me.
Hey, we've been talking about doing this for a while. We've known each other for a number of years, and I'm really excited to have this discussion with you because you've been committed to the space for many years. You've innovated, you've gone through the struggles. So, for those who might not know of you, can you introduce yourself and a little bit about your background?
Yeah. So Tony Ferreras. I work at Pinterest currently. I've also worked at Nordstrom, Lululemon, Symantec, DirecTV. But to your point, always in this space, or at least 90% of my career in this space. Did graduate school in psychology, like a lot of us in this field, and still at it, having fun, lots of fun.
Well, one of the things that has always struck me about you is that you've been a consummate learner. And yes, you have your credentials and you have your sets of experiences, but your openness to create and consider new ideas has always been inspiring to me. So, we're going to talk about a lot of things. We're going to talk about your background, talk about what you're doing now, your hopes and concerns and vision for the future. But before we get started, really curious about your background and how you got into the field. So if you would, start at the beginning. Where did you grow up? What educational background do you have?
Yeah. Um, I always get that question, and I always provide the short, boring answer to that question, which I'll get to. But I think this is a really good opportunity to, for the first time, talk about like really what happened and what led to that short, boring answer. I think I've always been it started with I've always been interested in psychology and sociology and those sorts of things. Super interesting topic just to understand other people. But the way that I got there, you know, um, for me, I was this little junior psychologist around when I was 12 to 14, something like that. Like a lot of us, growing when we choose this field, we see ourselves as that psychologist friend or something like that. Yeah, I was definitely that very young. But what led me to that, I basically created my own like self-help book. Not really, there's nothing that exists, but I did a lot of research around that age. And the reason for that is when I was growing up, um, I was a very conscientious person. And I learned that from especially my mom, who always taught me to be helpful, think of others, be reliable, all those components that make you a good kind of like citizen, a good individual or member of a group. But I think my problem was at that beginning, what led to eventually this almost need to start creating like a self-help book for myself at 12, 13, 14. Um, is that I think I incorrectly translated that to always defer to the group, always
Mm,
defer to others. And so as
mm,
you can imagine, I think that that challenge that I had led me to be a very not confident person. I never really took initiative. I didn't speak up when something was going in a different direction or somebody was making a decision that would go against my own principles or my own thoughts. And that didn't feel good to me,
mhm.
right? So I was always deferring. And that last part, that where, I thought that deferring to others was the right thing to do. Um, and that's certainly a big part of like my background, my culture, being Latino. Um, it didn't feel right to me, and so I wondered about that. That was around like 12, 13, 14, and at that time, and I'm gonna age myself a little bit here, that's when computers and the internet started becoming a little bit more attainable for the country, the US, for its for the consumer. And so I saved up and I bought myself a computer. Of course, my parents helped me with, because they were still very expensive back then, helped me with kind of the rest of the cost. But as soon as I got on the internet, I just started searching things like, why do I feel this way? Why do I not want to like go with what the group is saying, even though I was taught to be reliable, to be loyal, and all those sorts of things? Even though I incorrectly, I think, translated that to deference more than anything. And back then, we didn't have the Google algorithms. There wasn't a whole lot of content. So searching was really difficult, but I found a lot of stuff around like psychology and sociology, things like internal versus external locus of control, going back to, the concept of like not feeling good when you're doing something because the group is doing it, even though it goes against your own principles. That's called cognitive dissonance, all those sorts of things. So I would look those things up. A lot of stuff, was really interested in the concept of how group the group kind of governs or influences individual behavior, how the environment influences individual behavior, pressure, that sort of thing. Like one of my favorite experiments that have been done, super interested was interested in it, was the Stanford prison experiment. Um, Super famous. I don't think I need to explain so much about that, but all those things kind of came together for me, and just knowing what is happening helped me become much more of a confident person, make my
Mm,
own decisions, take initiative, and that sort of stuff. So fast forward, I went to grad school. I went to school. I went to grad school for psychology, sociology. I got 2 master's degrees. And by the end of my second master's, I didn't want to stop. I really liked the research part. And that's just going back to like my younger days, the 12 years old, when I was doing research on psychology. I really loved the topic of psychology and sociology. But what I really loved more was the research, the experiments, the statistics, the data, all that stuff that made it a science. And so after grad school, I just wanted to keep doing those activities. And
mm.
at the time, and you probably recall this, is people analytics wasn't really a thing. Um, I mean, Google started talking a little bit about it. I think you were at Gap. Um,
Yeah,
um, I don't even think data science was a term back then, honestly.
I
Uh,
agree. It wasn't used widely if it was.
no, but I found these jobs that were at least close enough. They did, I was able to do some of those things like data analytics, find the truths behind things, how to help people and workers and things like that be more successful. And I just followed that path. It was just, and I still love it. It's been a long time, but I'm still passionate about it. That's how I became
Well,
a manager, is because back then there were no managers in people analytics. So somebody said, "Do you want to be a manager?" I said, "Yeah, I'll do it."
and there you go. And you've been doing it for a long time since. So before we get into your work experience, I want to stay with you when you were younger because I'd like to understand, this better. As I, on behalf of our listeners, yeah, I'm really curious because where did you grow up? You mentioned you are Latino, and that had to. And being half Latino myself, I know the power of la familia, la raza, and how the community is such an important part of how we think, let alone act. So my pointed question is, what inspirations or cautions or ideas emerged from your family and your cultural background?
I appreciate that question. I mean, it's one of those things that I've really been wanting to talk about, but rarely get the opportunity to talk through that. Um, yeah, my parents were. were immigrated to the United States from Chile. I was born in Southern California, and I lived in a lower socioeconomic area, and so it was really really tough for us. For me, I mean, I grew up in it, and I didn't know any better. But what I did know or thought I knew was everybody had like a path, and it was based on like what everybody else is doing in the area. And I was mentioning, the concept of the kind of group pressure or just like the influence that the group have. All my friends and acquaintances were doing their thing. They were going their own paths, and that all those paths were admirable. To contribute to society, all those things. But I always felt like there was a little bit more that I could do, and you know, it, that's where I started doing like my own kind of research and things like that. What I think is important though is I wouldn't have been able to do it without that support. So when you think about La Familia, the group, the culture, those around you, those who believe in you, those who can do things for you. We all helped each other, whether it's through money or just kind of like a push or anything like that. And the important thing is that the way that I thought I translated how I should be as part of the group was wrong. Deferring to the group isn't exactly what the culture stands for. It's more really about like how do we help each other, and that's how I ended up getting to the place that I really wanted to be. Whether that's school or being part of this corporate America, helping employees, all that stuff. Regardless of that, I got to it because I shared my dream of doing something more, and being vulnerable enough to talk about that and to ask for help,
Mhm.
can be tough. But once you get to that point, at least within that culture, those groups and things like that, everybody did more to help.
Mm, mm,
Everybody helped push. Everybody kept me accountable too. Have you studied today, Tony? Have you done this? Have you done that? I mean, and that's so important. That's really so important. I mean, we're humans. We need others. Others help us. And I think the way that looks in different cultures is obviously different. That was just the experience that I have growing up um, in
wow.
my in Southern California.
Well, I mean, it's absolutely beautiful, and thank you for sharing. And I can imagine that you were going to a place where you yourself did not have clarity on what it looks like, and your family certainly did not having grown up here and had those sets of experiences. There had to be a lot of trust and faith that you were going to find your way and to be empowered to go on that journey. I believe is not only beautiful. It's necessary, and I give similar counsel to my kids. It's like don't try and do it all alone in this hero mentality that we have. It's like we have to support one another within family, within community. So it's a beautiful story. So thank you.
Thank you. And thanks for giving me the platform to be able to talk about that.
Well, of course, and now you're in graduate school and you're looking to do this work, whatever this work is, and without unpacking each and every experience that you've had, you have been in tech, you have been in retail, and you have been in charge of forming teams and taking teams to the next level. So, what did that journey look like? If we go back to when you first entered the field after grad school, assuming that was a straight line from grad school into the first role. I mean, what challenges were you facing then vis-a-vis, what we're facing now?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think a lot of people would who's been in it for that long could kind of relate to that experience. Is at the beginning it was mostly about transparency. HR had data, and they used data, um, but how it how it was used started becoming a little bit different. What we tracked started becoming different than what we've seen before. Things went from counts to percentages, from just knowledge to what's been trending, what to watch out for, that sort of thing. And so the transparency kind of grew into many more different areas. It became more, our HR stakeholders and leaders became much more curious about things. It was also a time when like other areas of the business, like marketing, technology, all those different parts of the business were coming up with ways to quantify, or more ways to quantify their business, and so it kind of felt, I think, for stakeholders and for leaders, that they were kind of falling behind, and so they would hire folks who did other jobs. Like my first job, well, during grad school, I was also working for a consulting firm who I did some data work as well. But like right after grad school, my first job was basically doing L&D type of work, learning and development, training, that sort of thing. But like half of my job was around like quantifying things around within HR, to create more of that transparency into what have we been up to, what's been going on, what is potentially the direction that we're heading in. So creating more robust dashboards and things like that. From there, uh, the natural question is why? Why is this happening? Why did this happen? And so after that, immediately after that, and this happens especially when you're able to productionize and democratize like the basic things that organizations should be looking at from a business perspective or a people perspective, is okay, I see that this is happening. What do I do about it? Or why
Mm.
is it happening? And so it went into kind of that realm of our world, and that's where we started looking a little bit deeper into certain data points, like turnover. What's causing turnover? What's predicting it? That sort of thing. Um, and then from there, they ask, what can we do about it? Right. So that's later on in my trajectory. That's the natural. It was this beautiful journey from the simple things that we all need to understand, through these natural kind of questions that evolve after each step after that.
Mm.
And I call it beautiful because it felt right every time we transitioned through those phases in our maturity model of building up, or excuse me, of building this capability in an organization. Around the time when, at the beginning, when I started being asked, what can we do about it, is when I started saying, I can't do everything, because it was
Mm.
just me, in most cases, a couple of us sometimes. And I said, I can't do it all. I mean, those are great questions, but I have to focus on like this basic stuff that the board is asking for, or whatever. So then they said, okay, well, build a team. Do you want to be a manager? And that's
There you
that's
go.
how it happened. And then from there, my career started growing from like, okay, tactical, let's get the team together, let's get these projects going, to more strategic around how do we improve the state of the employee experience? How do we look forward to the future of work, and how can we anticipate those things, and how can we build toward those things?
Well, yeah, you're getting me all excited because I want to talk about the future of work, and I specifically the appetite, and I say this compassionately, the quote unquote readiness of executives and other internal customers to consume the insight and take appropriate action. And because I see that still as a barrier today, and something that I'd love to get your take on in a little bit. But before we go there, You mentioned forming a team, and many organizational leaders are thinking, all right, the time is now. This used to be a discipline that was largely exclusive to large enterprises because they had the financial capability
Yeah.
to invest in teams and the like. However, there's a host of solutions now that are enabling mid-sized companies to adopt people analytics solutions, and they're getting this insight, and oftentimes they don't know what to do, and oftentimes they say, well, I need somebody to curate this, or build this, or
Yeah.
affect change here. And so who do I hire? What does a team look like? How do I prioritize the roles, and so forth? So when you thought about building teams, what were you considering as high priority?
Yeah, that's a great question. It starts with where the business is, for me at least. And I'm sure a lot of leaders in people analytics, this is sort of their brand is. For me, it is about the business. I mean, if you're in a for-profit organization, you want to help the organization be successful. And the way that I see it is that all these different kind of COEs, or different domain areas of data science and analytics are some way trying to build the right products, build the right insights that are related to their domain area, whether it's marketing or finance or whatever, that positively impact the business. And it's no different for people analytics, I think. I mean, what are we here for, right?
Hmm.
And so the generally what I first do when I come in is try to assess the landscape and how are we currently contributing to
Hmm.
that. And in many cases, in most of the cases that I've been in, most of the new companies that I've come into, people, to your point earlier, people analytics was a burgeoning thought. It was the beginning of it. They might have been doing some reporting, that sort of thing, but it wasn't in a kind of later advanced state.
Hmm.
And many of the times when I come in, what I'm asked is like for some super interesting, valuable, complex statistical insight. Right? They usually have questions around like, how do we get turnover under control? My first question is, well, do we know that there's a problem with turnover? What can I see the challenge? Is what makes us think that we have a problem with turnover? And in many of those cases, we foundationally don't even have the knowledge or the ability to determine that. I mean, basic business intelligence and reporting stuff is just either not there or whatever. And I've always been under the um, it's always been my um, thought that the most simple answer to a question is usually all that you need.
Hmm.
So if we don't have the ability to just understand where we're at, let's start with that.
Hmm.
And then let's work our way to the more complex stuff. I'm not saying that we shouldn't ever like jump to those things. There are lots of cases where we can pepper in, when we want to get really, interesting and like have those kind of like fun type of projects for our data scientists and things like that. Um, but if we're answering a question that we don't even know if it's actually a challenge or a problem, we're spending a lot of money on something that we may not need. So
Yeah.
my style of building this is, let's go, just like I went on a journey in my career from building the simple transparent all the way to the more kind of insightful sort of things that involve machine learning and things like that. I try to do the same thing within an organization. Let's figure out what's missing, what can help the business now, and then let's build on top of that with all the other things that will get us even closer to evidence-based employee experience, impactful insights.
Yeah, I'm smiling. If you're listening to this, you're not seeing me smile, but I just love the fact that you stay in curiosity, and you co-create, as what I'm hearing, the most appropriate way forward. What I have seen those who are new to the field do is exactly what you identified, is that, hey, here's a cool project, and I'm going to go do fancy,
Yeah,
algorithms and data science on this, and I'm going to like get published, and this is going to be awesome. And I will say, I'm talking about me earlier in my career, where I was like, just, give me data, give me a problem, and I'm just going to go chase it. Where now at this stage of my career, and in working with the likes of you, it's like, hey, for the sake of what?
yeah,
What are we doing? How do is this really a winnable dynamic? And is it a top priority relative to all the other things that we can do? So I just want to highlight and certainly
yeah.
celebrate it. One of the
I
things.
will I
Yeah,
I
go
will
ahead.
relate to that. The way that I relate to that is that early in my career, I wanted to do that stuff. I wanted to run a regression and do all that stuff. And it was always fun and it was always useful. It absolutely was. Um, it's just like you, and in learning and the experiences that I've had, sometimes it's easier and more impactful to start with, what's missing, the basic things that are missing.
Hmm. Yeah, and that's oftentimes not a heavy lift, and it's not.
No.
Yeah, I don't like the term sexy necessarily, but we'll just use that for the time being,
Yeah,
and because it's not something that's going to get you published or build your brand
yeah,
internally, but it is necessary.
yeah,
And so, what I want to come back to, because you said this at the outset, you said we, and and if I'm listening to you, I'm assuming you're talking about people analytics. And however, there is arguably overlap between people analytics, workforce planning, employee experience. Now, the term talent intelligence
yeah,
has been introduced into the market. What is your feeling about we? And what is the capability? What are we delivering? I mean, actually, even before that, who is we? Like, who are you talking
yeah.
about in terms of a data centric, data or in data insight producing, entity within HR?
Yeah, another great question. And I think, Al, I think we need to revisit probably the term that we use for this function that we now call people analytics,
Amen.
because it's in my belief that, and in my experience, that people analytics is not one thing. Um, it's several different things. It's several different concepts, related, but necessarily, I think they should be combined, because they inform each other and they create this kind of holistic story for our, stakeholders and decision makers in our companies. And so, what I mean by that is, given that I probably should use a different term for, what I'm describing for now, people analytics. It's a bunch of different things. I think it is workforce planning. I think it is, headcount planning, forecasting. I think it is surveys and this employee intelligence through, the employee voice. I think it is employee experience. In fact, I think you and I had a conversation a long time ago, and I don't know if you remember this. The concept of employee experience started kind of bubbling up, and, you and I started, I think somebody else was there, David Green or something like that, was there, and we started talking about, like, where should that live? And, I was mentioning, I think David also mentioned that it feels like I'm already doing that. It feels like I'm already trying to understand the employee experience and how to impact it, those sorts of things. But anyways, employee experience, and what we might traditionally consider, people analytics, which is the business intelligence work. In some cases, reporting, if you have that in your, function. It's the, analytical and data science stuff. It's the research. It's the consulting piece in many cases. I think it's different these days than it was before. It is a bigger function. It's a
Mhm.
bigger type of organization, um, because all those components very directly inform
Mm.
each other. I think one of the things that's missing, and I think I'm skipping ahead here, and we can expand on this later when we talk about it. But one of the things that I think is probably missing is this more formalization or normalization of conceptually what is people analytics within the HR strategy. And I think big companies probably figured that out.
Mm.
Um, I think most companies are still trying to understand like what that actually looks like and what is inclusive of people analytics and how does that work with the other components of the business or within HR.
Well, I love it. Let's run with it. And because if I'm listening, I want to know more about that. Because if I'm a leader and I have like suboptimal processes and tech and data and insights, I want to know, how to improve. And for me, that highlights this notion of governance, which I am
Mm.
like a broken record on this. Can I say
Same.
skip CD? It's like, who's the insight for? And what is the appropriate action, because the actions are going to impact one another, so there has to be a systematic approach. So my point of question to you, as we are here in 2023 and we have so many technologies and more data and the speed in which this insight is being generated, and even the quality of the insight arguably is far outstretching the organizational capability to consume it and in turn take appropriate action. What do you think
Yeah.
about that statement, and what is the role in governance in solving for that?
Yeah, let me start with the first part. I think we deal with that a lot, at least in in what I'm having there, or in the previous companies that I've been in, is that um, insights and analytics can be easy and quick. It could also be slow and painful. It really depends on your infrastructure. It depends on like your um, what if you have any vendors, anything like that. Like what does your data look like? It's all those kind of different components as well. What I think is it all comes back to like where are we going to make the biggest impact in the business? Where is the business now? What do they need now? Um, but let's say we have the capability of moving quicker. And let me know if I'm going off on like another tangent.
No, not at all. Keep.
Let's say we're able to move quickly and in some cases a little bit quicker than the business can kind of intake. What I'm a huge fan of is this concept of back pocket insights. And what I mean by that is I think people analytics should be the need should be embedded programmatically in HR so that end to end, from the beginning of a project or program or whatever to the end, we're involved to be able to provide helpful evidence-based directions. We can test things, help with those things, provide or identify or help to identify KPIs. Co-create all those pieces to make the project successful. The concept of when we're moving a little bit quicker and we have more than the business can consume, yeah, at the moment, but in those projects, in those moments where we're kind of thrown into these new projects from the beginning, we have a lot of insights where we can nimbly help provide direction based on something that we've already known for
Hmm,
a while.
hmm,
So I think there's a place for it. I think moving too quickly could be problematic. I but I think that a healthy amount of like staying ahead of what the business can consume is incredibly helpful for being proactive, or even if it's not proactive, it's on time
mhm.
when the needs come up.
Thank you for sharing that. And I am thinking about a executive meeting called the HR leadership team or executive leadership team, and they're getting They're going through their quarterly business review, and I've been a long advocate of a quarterly workforce review and plan, which aligns with QBR process. And just bear with me for a second. Let's say that's happening, and there's insight that they don't anticipate, and it's just out of left field.
Mm,
What is going to be the response of the people in the room? There might be a level of irritation that might be dismissed because they don't understand it. However, if it's socialized beforehand and set the expectation that, hey, this insight, we're investigating this, you've deemed this a priority for us to look at, whether it
yeah,
be diversity, equity, inclusion, whatever, the receptivity of that insight is going to be much higher than it would otherwise be. And if the people in that room are cross function, if they're IT, operations, HR, finance, on down the line, then the ability to align actions moving forward, in my view, would be heightened. So am I hearing you correctly when you're talking about whether it be back pocket insights is like really understanding your internal customer and involving them earlier rather than later?
yeah. I would say that that's very well in line with what I was describing. And just to add to that, the concept of bringing others along is so incredibly important. Whether from like the larger kind of macro scale of the concept of people analytics, or just to your point, like the specific localized insights that might come out of left field. Part of this job is to make sure that the insights, the answers to their pressing, challenging questions land well.
Hmm.
Um, it seems like, and at least the younger Tony at the beginning of his career thought, well, this is just math. It's statistics. 1 + 1 = 2. So you know everybody should just believe that, and we're done with it. My job is done. Um, that's not really how it works. There's this journey that you have to bring from the micro or from the macro perspective. There's a journey that we need to bring our stakeholders on, no matter the level. I think um, to make sure it lands well, to make sure it's actionable, um, that it helps with strategy or helps inform strategy. Um, it's harder to co-create or to have our insights be successful, to have successful insights if the stakeholder is not there,
Hmm.
um, or comes from left field. Those
Yeah.
concepts that you're referring to.
Well, thank you for sharing that because I could not agree more. And that's where, frankly, I'm spending a lot of my time right now is investigating that dynamic where, we talk about evidence-based decision making, like you said earlier. It's like, okay, here's the evidence. So the whole world should just follow in line because it's evidence. It's
Mhm.
empirically studied. That's what's going on. But that isn't how the world works, particularly when we're talking about social dynamics within organizations. And we can investigate that for a long time. So we're going to have to come back to it. But I
Yeah.
want to toggle a little bit to this notion of micro because we just alluded to governance and kind of you talked about talent strategy earlier and how the insights inform talent strategy and that's still significant runway to investigate and improve upon, but also our ability through these technologies to deliver insights at scale down to people managers and other key stakeholders is far beyond what it was 15, 20 years
Yes.
ago. So, when you talk about socializing and creating an appetite for that insight through to a larger group, what's your advice and experience there?
It's educating. It's starting them with the useful tidbits, and then grow from there. I think when usually when it's the least successful, it's because it's too much.
Mhm.
Um, to the point that we were talking about earlier, it's not going to land or it's difficult. Um, those sorts of things. I think education. I think training. I think bringing people along on this journey with us is so important. But besides that, you know, having the consulting kind of skill, this is true for almost any role, honestly.
Mhm.
But especially for, the concept of people analytics, or just kind of HR type of data, it's while it's been around for a while, almost 20 years, at least the modern way that we look at people analytics, it's still newer
Right.
than other areas,
Right.
right? And we we have to make sure that we remember that, and help our stakeholders kind of along on that journey. I've done a lot of other things too, to help others on this journey, and one of them is, how do we more simplify what we're trying to convey on these tools? Even the simplest things in a tool, what makes it hard is, what does it mean,
Mhm. Right.
right? And what I've done in the past, which is my favorite things to do in the past that I haven't been able to do everywhere I go. But one of them is like the concept of like sending out random tweets of like insights.
Mm.
I mean, not real tweets, but like internal Slack messages that are very quick, um, and relevant, based on high level things that we discovered just by looking through the tools that are already open to others. Um, because that gets people interested in trying to find their own little quick, nimble insights from that. It's basically mentoring. It's giving an example of what you should be looking for.
Yeah, I again, I'm smiling big because, it's setting the table. It's like when we have the big aha, we haven't been heard from a month or 2, it's like it just doesn't work. And so, how can we remain top of mind in a very appropriate, palatable way that helps them? Because one of the things I just want to highlight too is that there's many structures of interpretation out there where, okay, if I share this all the time when I speak publicly, what's the number one reason people leave organizations? And most everybody will mumble, dissatisfaction with their media manager. And I'm like, that research is 35 years old, and we don't know. In your organization, it's worth investigating because there's a bunch
Yeah,
of factors that are influencing that. So, trying to unhinge this legacy thinking to and
yeah,
open minds to what's really happening so they can take appropriate action, I think is really important. And what I want to do too, in the balance of our time, because I would be remiss if we didn't get to it,
sure.
because this people analytics, workforce planning, all this stuff can be esoteric and intimidating. And part of our challenge in this discipline forever has been simplifying it and making
Yeah,
it consumable and actionable, and all this. So now we have all these tools that, and we talk about predictive analytics, prescriptive analytics, AI. And what are your thoughts there? And I'm going to bias your answer a little bit potentially, because there is kind of this thought that I see that, okay, AI is going to solve, all this, these challenges that we have, and people aren't going to have to make as many decisions because the technology is going to take care of a lot of it. And I see it oftentimes being more distracting than valuable. What are your thoughts?
yeah. I think it is. I think it's exciting to see some of those things. I mean, very relevant for now. I've been getting into the concept of the Chat GPT. It's really interesting.
Yeah.
Certainly, but anyone listening, try, those tools that are coming up, and what you'll find is they're helpful, but they're not ready. You know, I think they're at a place where they are. You're right. I think they are at a place where they're a bit distracting. um, they can support, but they, I think, are a long way from the point where they could replace many of the skills or functions that currently are out there. Um, I find that I have to correct things like Chat GPT quite a bit
Right.
still. So I think that there's a lot of good tools out there, and the best tools out there that utilize AI, machine learning, those sorts of things are the ones that are realistically using the things that we know can be useful now and are more accurate than like just letting it go rampant, or letting it do whatever it is that we want it to do.
Sure.
But besides that, I think as a field, people analytics, I think there's um, I think we need to change.
Mm.
There's as tools get better, as AI gets better, I think that we just need to change the way that we do things or how we use tools, the roles that we hire for, that we need for these things. Um, I really like the concept of like some of the current tools that are out there. I usually call them like off the shelf type of analytics tools, because they make our jobs a whole lot easier. But it does open up the need for a different type of analyst
Yeah. Right.
on on the team, and help them be more confident, help the business be more confident, um, and provide even more help, more insights.
Well, again, I celebrate what you're sharing because I 100% agree. Number one, and number two, as we fast forward in, or move over time, because you're right, there are a lot of solutions that are out there that are delivering insight faster at at a greater degree of scale and in more sustainable, ethically responsible ways. So there's a lot of the concerns. I'm not going to say they're being alleviated because that would be way overstating it. At the
Yeah,
same time, the ability to secure data has improved and continues to improve. Again, there's always going to be
yeah,
risk there, but the idea that, oh, we're not there yet, isn't really a good argument. It's really a leader decision on whether or not you proceed with one of these technologies. And then if you
sure,
do, you're going to need internal capability to
sure,
actually operationalize it. So my
yeah.
question now, when you talk about like new roles, and based on what you shared earlier, would you see people analytics evolving into a more consultative facilitator role as opposed to data jockeys that are, crunching data, for 8, 10, 12 hours a day?
I think to a degree. I believe that we should build the capability in like HRBPs and things like that to do some of that kind of like ability to create the insights and be consultants themselves around the data. I um, I'm big on productionizing and democratizing and creating the capability, creating like these junior analysts out there. I think we're just as a team, we're not big enough to be able to do that on an individual basis, and I don't think most companies are going to be able to do that. So building that capability even to a certain degree is going to be really important. What I think is still kind of miss that will be missing is when we start getting into a lot of the kind of the insights that will inform strategic directions.
Hmm.
Those can be a little bit more just either complex or just more involved, if you wish. And it's more about the macro than it is about these kind of localized needs that exist. So I think it's a mix, really, to answer your question.
Okay. Because, yeah, at the end of it, yeah, I see the evolution of the space. And when you and I entered it, there was a lot of work that needed to be done on data management. And much of the work that
Mhm,
we were
mhm.
doing in Excel. We would access databases. We had,
Yeah,
and it makes my heart stop thinking about it, given where we are today. But a lot of that work is now automated, and so we do have the
yeah,
opportunity to focus on, more kind of value added activities
sure.
such as, change management. But I agree with you. There still has to be a working knowledge of what's happening with the data. we're never going to be able to write that off. Correct me if
Yeah.
I'm wrong, because it's our responsibility as employers to ensure that that is taking place. But
Yeah.
my yeah, as we start to wrap up here, I have a few more questions, and then I want to get into some rapid fire questions, because we talked about AI, we talked about the strategic stuff, which we can revisit and maybe a Profile Live episode, or in the future, because there's a lot to involve or get interested in, and get and unpack. I tried not to use that word, but I'll just use it. What I do want to talk about is the key theme that is not going to go away, of diversity, equity, and inclusion, and the
Yeah.
role analytics has in helping that, because it's such a challenge when we talk about measuring their sensitivity, both legally and emotionally. So, yeah, as you tackle this problem in tech, and you've been in retail as well, I mean, what's the room for innovation in that area? And is it something that is still a priority for you personally, as well as who you're working with currently?
Absolutely is a priority. Continues to be, I think, and it will be, um, definitely continuing into the future. In terms of like the room for innovation, yeah, there is. I mean, I think what's missing from it is kind of where the general insights that we create for out of people analytics for businesses. I think that's kind of gotten to a very advanced point where
Hmm.
we are being very prescriptive with our insights. You should do this to impact this other thing. If you want to increase your engagement by 2 notches, you do this other thing, sort of thing. There are companies that do this for D and I, but I think there's, broadly speaking, it's such an important topic that it could use more attention
Mm,
around, like, how can we specifically improve in many different areas within a business. One of the things that you mentioned before, that was really interesting to me, was the concept of, like, research that's been done like long time ago, that might be that might be best practice. It might be something that someone learned, um, but it may not be right for your own organization. It might be, or it might be a tweak of it. One of the things that one of the things that I really love about people analytics is that it is basically a type of function that can validate whether those things are right for you.
mm,
And I think that there's so much of that, being able to kind of customize how can we improve inclusion, take the research that's out there, understand how it relates to our own companies, and find the evidence that points us in the directions that will facilitate it for us. Because it's not the same wherever we go. The
yeah.
situations aren't the same. Like, how someone is not being included could be different wherever we go. And I think that's a missed opportunity if we don't have a function internally that can validate those things internally and help our D&I partners focus our efforts to being a much better company.
Yeah. And so what I'm hearing is people analytics is essential, and they need to be working very closely with their DNI
Yes.
partners to not only create insight into what's happening currently, but also to measure and monitor programs moving forward. Is that fair?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, thank you for that. So, uh, Tony, I could talk to you all day, man. I just love
Absolutely.
how you show up and what you've done. And so, you ready for some rapid fire questions? It's actually a good segue from what you just shared.
All right. I'm
You
nervous.
you ready? All right,
Go ahead.
you should be. Now, so, what are your hopes for the discipline of people analytics in the next 2 or 3 years?
Oh, that's a good one. Rapid fire. I think seeing it more integrated into kind of the common broader HR strategy. I think I mentioned it offhand before, that I think the big companies, the ones with money, the ones that might look at things a little bit differently, are probably doing it, probably doing it well. But I think more broadly, the concept of HR, if we can look at it from a different lens and look at how we integrate people analytics a little bit more embedded throughout, I think that's one of the things that I kind of really envision, look for, and hoping for, so that we don't have to like keep building up that capability every time one people analytics leader goes into a different company and
Yeah.
tries to help embed that.
No, and thank you for calling that out because I hope that too, because one of our challenges has been sustainability, because it's
Yeah.
been largely person dependent, and we got to build something again that's sustainable. So thank you for that. The next one is who inspires you, and particularly with your background in psychology and sociology, who, whether it be a podcaster, author, or whomever, who is top of mind for you right now, and it can be one, two, three individuals, but who inspires you to think more creatively about your work?
Is it a cop out to say it's my wife?
No, it's
I
not
know
a cop out to say that at all.
she's not an author. She's not like somebody famous or anything like that. Well, she should be, honestly, but my wife pushes me hard to be better, to be more innovative, all those things. And so that translates into everything else that I do. But beyond that, believe it or not, it's not necessarily like the psychologists or the sociologists or any of those folks, but it's more of the philosophers.
Hmm.
Um, and just being on the spot, I can't think of one, but like the way that philosophy happens, it's technically a very innovative process. It's like a very introspective, and then that becomes like this new thought, new idea, new direction, new everything, and it's unhindered.
Hmm.
Um, like science, or when we write scientific articles and things like, it's always based on like, well, in the past we did this, this happened, or this is enhancing on this other idea, that sort of thing. And that's fun. I love looking at that stuff. But philosophy starts from somewhere else.
Hmm.
It starts somewhere internally and then becomes something potentially useful.
Wow. Yeah. Well, thank you for that. And you're highlighting the fact that we do have a noble discipline in that we are curating and harboring the insights into people's behavior, and we need to hold ourselves to account. And that is a philosophical question. Well, for the sake of what? What are we doing? So, thank you for sharing that and
Yeah.
calling that out. This is going to be a bit of a jump cognitively to the next question. Actually, it might
Okay.
not be. What is your favorite genre of music? What do you listen to?
Ooh. I'm not sure if I should be embarrassed by this, but growing up as a teenager in like the early mid '90s, I loved ska, like the punk ska
Yeah,
genre.
all good.
Um, I mean, back then it was also like the grunge, like Nirvana and stuff like that. But what I really liked was the kind of like happy sound of ska. Um,
Did you drive a
and
Vespa
then
with an overcoat?
what's that?
Did you drive a Vespa with an overcoat and like a
I should have.
big Barbie hat?
I should have. But besides that, something that's probably much more relatable for most of the population is, I really loved like '70s rock,
Hmm.
Led Zeppelin, Ramones, which would be punk, that sort of thing.
Yeah, no, well, thank you. And the final question is, what do you and your family do for fun?
Ooh, we travel. We go outside and like garden and um, try to build things, things like that.
Nice, nice. And so Yeah, as we wrap here, any closing comments, ideas, suggestions for our listener?
HR, the future of work, all that stuff is so incredibly important, and it's always changing, especially the future of work. That's why it's called the future of work. You're never going to be out of business, Al, with
Knock on wood.
that. Um, and what what it really needs is like this openness
Mm.
to different ways of looking at things. How do we better support our employees? And so that openness is I think a tip that will help us in this field, kind of in general in HR, but certainly in people analytics and how it will support the future of work is the openness to look at things a little bit differently and to think about how can we better support.
Oh gosh, I so embrace that, and oftentimes being open like that is vulnerable. It's a bit uncomfortable. Creating that space just to have that exploration, have those discussions. It's oftentimes it's not prioritized, but I certainly celebrate that. It has to be prioritized. Otherwise, we're just going to go into the chaos. Just not knowing really where we're heading. So, Tony, thank you for sharing your personal stories, your ideas on the space. How can people learn more about you and what you're up
And thanks for the time. Really appreciated. You can follow me on LinkedIn. You can message me through there.
to?
Um,
All right.
Add me as a friend.
All right, sir. Well, you have a great rest of the day. Super appreciate you again and look forward to talking soon. Be well.
Thank you.
All right. See you, Tony. Thank you for listening to this member supported production by PFAO, People Analytics and Future of Work. To view or listen to more episodes, visit pfao.net or follow us on your favorite social media channel or podcast player. Thanks again, and please continue to make great things happen.